having a bifocals moment. If I put my glasses on, I can't see your lovely faces. So I'm just going to look out for a moment and ask you the question, what are the million tiny sparks of grace that have brought you to this moment here that we are sharing right now? There's no way to calculate them. It is a great infinite tapestry of stories that we wind backwards through time, stories whose maybe third or eighth or 80th chapter is today. Grace in chance meetings, grace in purposeful planning, grace when a community can accomplish more together than we can individually. We are together here because other people have gathered together before us. Their experience of joy at being together created space for us to be here in a way that could not be seen by them then. Of course, there is the little g gathering, accidental gatherings, chance meetings, casual get-togethers. And then there's the big G gathering, a purposeful movement or companionship. There is gathering and holding hands while walking through a park. There is gathering and having friends over for dinner. And there is gathering of leaders of great nations and armies as they maneuver and trade. Each type of gathering sparking moments of potential grace, moments that probably will make way for infinite unfoldings into the future. I'd like to share a story of small G gatherings and big G gatherings through the eyes of an exceptional young woman, I think you will all agree, whose own life may have informed the ways we understand ourselves today. Perhaps as Unitarian Universalists, or maybe just in how we get together with friends or colleagues. We'll call her Kate for simplicity. Her youth was spent in a Benedictine cloister, though it was not uncommon for girls of families of a certain status during these times. It became apparent pretty quickly by her middle teenage years that life in a convent would not give Kate the life she wanted. She was fiercely independent, and she understood that even while the teachings she had learned in the convent were important for her formation, she did not want to spend the rest of her life in the stony confines of the sisterhood. She was interested in politics and reforms of the time. She wanted to be involved in a way that it would not have been permitted within those walls at that time anyway. So she plotted with several of the other young nuns to flee under the cover of darkness in the back of a fishmonger's wagon. Ooh. The arrival in the small town of a wagon full of young escaped nuns did not go unnoticed, as you can imagine. In fact, there is a letter from that time someone wrote, and it states, I quote, "A wagon load of Vestal virgins has come to town, all more eager for marriage than for life. God grant them husbands, lest worse befall." This young ex-nun, Kate, had her eyes set on marrying one of the men who had helped her escape, a man of some esteem in the town. And after about 2 years of persistence on her part, he finally agreed, and they were married. The marriage, much to the disbelief of almost everyone, was a success. The couple were truly fond of each other. They relished in each other's intellect and laughter and storytelling ability. They, as it turns out, needed one another. They had several children, and their household became a bustling center of intellectual activity. By most accounts, this was thanks to Kate's tremendous ability to gather people. Both the little g gather of people, getting people together, but also the big G gathering of fostering an environment of mutual care and mutual respect and mutual love in that house. She was a whirlwind. She provided a place where sometimes 30 or 40 people gathered, convened for meals and lively discussions. And in fact, one of the skills that she had learned in her earlier life, that of the revered monastic practice of brewing beer, became a central core ingredient to those feisty, loud, and intellectually stimulating evenings of conversation, where her opinion and wit was renowned for being as freely shared as the beer itself. It was in these meetings that the framework for some groundbreaking, truly world-changing discussions took place. Within several years, the influences of the discussions in that household would reverberate around the world, quite literally. Within a mere century, gatherings of a related sort, maybe with less beer, I don't know, I wasn't there. Gatherings started taking place in New England, in Massachusetts, to be exact. Gatherings in which people explored topics about what it meant to be a community gathered, both in the little g sense of being physically together, but also in the big G sense of shared mission and mutual support. You see, they were also realizing they needed one another. So in 1648, a group of these churchgoers in Massachusetts gathered after about 10 years of conversation and debate to publish what is commonly known as the Cambridge Platform. That's the short version. It has a longer name, a platform of church discipline gathered out of the Word of God and agreed upon by the elders and the messengers of the church's assembly, creedal decree of what one must believe, but rather how to be together in a congregation. These churches were meant to be tied together, not as independent, big G gatherings, but rather autonomous and interdependent congregations. As Sue Phillips writes, congregational polity, which is this understanding, is not the autonomy of individual congregations, but the covenanted communion of autonomous churches, what we refer to as congregational polity. And you might ask yourself, why does this matter right here in this space where we are? Because we gather, because we need each other, and it matters how we are together. This may be an autonomous church, but we are not independent from one another. I became a Unitarian Universalist right here in these walls. Who knew what grace abounded when I attended my first service here, that being a poetry service, one that changed the course of my life. And I will say, when I arrived today and found my name tag that my then 3-year-old colored, I was thrilled. My 3-year-old is now 18. It matters that we are autonomous and interdependent. I serve a UU congregation on the other side of the country. And yet you and I are connected because we need each other. I will also mention that just last week at General Assembly, the Reverend Sophia Betancourt was elected the new president of the Unitarian Universalist Association. And she has affirmed as one of her top 3 priorities, communal care for one another. Communal care. Priya Patel writes, "Why do we gather? We gather to solve problems we can't solve on our own. We gather to celebrate, to mourn, and to mark transitions. We gather to make decisions. We gather because we need one another," she writes. "We gather to show strength. We gather to honor and acknowledge. We gather to build companies and schools and neighborhoods. We gather to welcome, to relax, and also to say goodbye. But here is the great paradox of gathering," she suggests. "There are so many good reasons for coming together that often we don't know precisely why we are doing so. You are not alone if you skip the first step in convening people meaningfully, that is, committing to a bold and sharp purpose." I like to think that those Congregationalist founders who debated and argued and convened and conceived of a different way to do church, compared to the models of centralized financial and moral power that were present at the time and still present today, I like to think of those leaders, of them gathering, big G gatherings in mutual support. They were looking for bold, sharp purpose based in covenant, mutual care, not greed. Big G gatherings of affirmation of individual paths of spiritual growth and development. Sue Phillips goes on to write, "Our associational polity is a living tradition, a pathway for mutually covenanted religious life. Activated by covenant, our polity is more than the simple fact of our connection as individuals, groups of practicing Unitarian Universalists and congregations. It's also the commitment to connect, the means to connect, the content of the connection, and how we maintain the connection." I love that, and I think that the young, escaped ex-nun who excelled at brewing and gathering people, creating space for lively debate and intellectual growth, I think she would have appreciated that. A commitment to connect, the means to connect, and the content of the connection, and how we maintain that connection. That woman was, after all, D. Lutheris, Katharina von Bora, the wife of Martin Luther. You may have heard of him. She was, of course, not a Unitarian by any stretch of the imagination, but at her table were hashed out the foundations of a different kind of gathering, a different kind of church, the tenets of which were carried to the shores of North America, that formed the environment of discernment that made congregation polity based on covenant, not creed, possible. That covenant extended. Some was changed by science, a changing world, other voices, some with ancestral roots here in this land, and others from far and wide. Hers is only one voice in our wide and vast inheritance, and today, while I've centered hers, there are many, many more who make up our stories. And here, now, we gather. Not independent, but interdependent. To be a Unitarian Universalist or congregation is to claim and be claimed by covenant, by how we are together. So let us be claimed by it. Let us claim it. When we enter and rejoice in this space, we are covenanting to one another, to gather in community, to affirm mutual support and care. Now, I'm not saying that Katerina von Bora's care for her guests or her brewing skills are why we are here today, but I'm also not saying that. But I think her example shows us something, that we can't do it alone. We need one another. When we gather with intention and purpose, whether that's with a loved one for a meal, with our children for a game of cards, or with colleagues to dream of new ways of moving forward, we need one another. We need each other. What moments of grace will our gatherings be for our descendants in the future? When others look back at this moment in time and they see us and the ways that we have gathered, what sparks of joy and community will they see? What life-changing moments will they notice? Moments of grace and turning point. While we might not have a grand table like the one Katerina von Bora presided over with 30 or 40 guests each day to debate over spiritual life, intellectual matters, and the future of the church, we have vibrant Unitarian Universalist congregations, and soon we'll have coffee hour, and that's about the same thing sometimes. May it be so.